The debate is especially important to my constituents of Esquimalt-Juan-de-Fuca because I serve the men and women and their families who are at Canadian Forces Base Esquimalt and who, to a person, do a remarkable job, one that as Canadians we are deeply indebted to and for their work. To start off with, in February 2007, allegations surfaced of abuse of 3 Afghans in Canadian custody. The Military Police Complaints Commission launched an investigation into these detainees. In March, warnings came from Mr. Richard Colvin, a heroic public servant he spoke at that time and gave warnings to the government about torture that was taking place with detainees that were given to the NDS. What happened as time has progressed, the Conservative government has done everything in its power to block and prevent the truth from coming out. And why this is important, Madam Speaker, for more than anything else, is for our troops, for the Afghan people, and for the success of the mission. And I'll get to that in a little bit later period of time. This particular issue, we're trying to get to the bottom of it because the government has this little game that they play, and then the parliamentary secretary was playing it just before question period. What the government does is they sidle up to the Canadian forces, they put their arm around them, wrap themselves around with the Canadian flag, and say, we're with the Canadian forces, everybody else is against them. What a bunch of nonsense. Every single political party in this House of Commons, Madam Speaker, supports the institution of the Canadian Forces, the men and women who serve the Canadian Forces, and their families. So this kind of nonsense that's being portrayed and trotted out by the government is offensive. An example. And what they have failed to do while wrapping themselves up with the Canadian Forces and claiming to be their best friends, while utilizing them as a tool against everybody else, in effect, what they've been doing is negating and actually not engaging in their responsibility, which was to be able to have an effective plan for Afghanistan. The government has taken the Afghanistan mission and looked at it through the narrow prism of the military. But in effect, what we have here is an insurgency that's primarily coming from Pakistan, not from within Afghanistan. In an insurgency, what you have to do is you have to defeat an insurgency through political means, utilizing military tools as a backup to those political interventions. But what the government has done, in effect, the Conservative government, is that they have utterly failed in the 4 years that they have been at the helm to come up with any political strategy for Afghanistan, any political strategy for Pakistan, which is at the center of Al-Qaeda, any kind of national debate to be able to bring together the best and brightest minds we have to deal with this? No. They look at this through the military prism, and by doing that, they compromise and they weaken and they compromise the lives of our Canadian forces, the mission itself, and the Afghan people. Now, why is that important? And I must say that our forces members have exerted extraordinary restraint and professionalism on the field, and that is without any debate whatsoever. They have been absolutely extraordinary. But what the Canadian government has done, by the failure to deal with these issues politically, they've actually compromised our ability to do better in the mission and compromise the lives of our forces, because by having a political doctrine that's compromised our Canadian Forces members, by not dealing with the detainee issue, by burying their head in the sand, by not being proactive, what actually happened is you destroy the hearts and minds aspect of the mission. Because many of these people have actually been, in the words of Mr. Colvin and others who have been in Afghanistan, individuals who are simply people at the wrong place at the wrong time. Farmers, people who are peasants, individuals who are just ordinary rural folk have been caught up, tortured. What happens if you're tortured? The people who pick you up become the problem. And so what happens is that the government's political failures are actually causing a failure in the mission that is out of the hands of our Canadian forces and compromises the lives of our Canadian forces, compromises the mission, and compromises the lives of the Afghan people. So what have they failed to do? First of all, in terms of an overriding objective, we went into Afghanistan, Madam Speaker, to get rid of Al-Qaeda. Job done very quickly by our forces and others, and well done at that. We did not, however, go into nation build. And what's happened is that this mission has quietly morphed into a nation-building exercise. What's happened also is that the actual insurgency coming from Pakistan has not evoked any kind of plan from the government to come out with a political strategy for Pakistan. Right. And then they talk about the Taliban being some monolithic structure. What a bunch of nonsense. The Taliban is a heterogeneous structure made up of individuals who are warlords, common thugs, yes, religious zealots, individuals who have been family members who have been killed or harmed by coalition forces. And the three major groups that are coming in the insurgency are the ones by Mullah Omar and the warlords Haqqani and Hekmatyar. Those are the three major insurgencies coming in from Afghanistan. Do we hear anything about that from the government? Do they have a plan to deal with this? No, they don't. They don't at all. So what in effect they're doing by their political failure, they're actually sowing the seeds of a potential Vietnam quagmire. And it's our men and women out there in the dirt, in the dust, in very, very difficult circumstances who are paying the price for this. So the irony of it all is while the Conservative government wraps themselves up in the flag and with the Canadian forces, their political failures are in fact compromising the lives of our men and women in uniform. And that, Madam Speaker, is absolutely inexcusable. The members are saying, come on, but we don't hear for a moment any kind of plan of action whatsoever in terms of what they have to deal with the mission at hand. Well, here's a few suggestions. So what's happened is that the security forces and security situation is controlled by members of the Tajik tribe who are part of the Mujahideen, the individuals that the Taliban kicked out because they were corrupt and they were abusive to the people. The government, Madam Speaker, has no plan to address that problem. So the and inter-tribal problems and the abnormal and unnatural structure that exists right now in Afghanistan is not being addressed. And unless you address it, you can't have peace there whatsoever. The government of Mr. Karzai is predatory, venal, and corrupt. Is there a plan to deal with corruption in that government, Madam Speaker? No. They talk about it. There isn't one at all. And the fact of the matter is that corruption kills. Corruption is the cancer that will prevent the mission from being successful and prevent the Afghan people from being able to enjoy the safety and security that they have wanted for decades. Ultimately, security is up to the Afghan people, not up to Western forces. And increasingly, we're seen to be part of the problem in Afghanistan. So what may some of those solutions be? Number one, a doctrine to deal with corruption within Mr. Karzai's government that has not zero tolerance, but being able to go and have a situation where we take a much firmer line on that. Secondly, a transparent reporting mechanism so the Afghan people can have access to know where the monies are going, which should go for primary services and healthcare education as well as into security. The political process must be instituted to encourage various members of the Taliban leadership to be part of the political solution and the power structure within Afghanistan. You hive off elements of the Taliban and you're able to sort of weaken the Taliban in a way that enables those people to be able to have be part of the political solution and have ownership of their country. A regional working group must also be instituted involving Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Iran, and others in the region that need to, including India, that has to be congruent with the future and the interests of a stable Afghanistan. India and Pakistan are part of the problem in Afghanistan. So in essence, Afghanistan's future in some ways lies outside of the country, and that has to be dealt with. I just want to close, Madam Speaker, and say this. The government is focused on a very narrow, through a very narrow prism with respect to the mission in Afghanistan. It is a very complex situation. It requires a coherent, intelligent, and well-executed political solution that focuses on enabling the Afghan people to be the masters of their security forces. We will not, and Afghanistan will not be a democratic, Western-loving, human rights-respecting nation. It is the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. So we have to change our goals. In the end, it's up to the government to implement these solutions. The failure to do that fails our troops, fails the people of Afghanistan, and fails the people of our country. Thank you.